So today we're going to service the universal or Brumby style of tap. To do that we need to remove the tap from the system. So to start we'll need a kit, obviously the tap. We need a thing called like a winkle picker or a dart or a Leatherman tool using the pointy nose pliers would be ideal. C-spanner and just in case a pair of multi-grips. Right, to start with we need to remove the spigot from the back end of the tap. To do that we're going to use the C-spanner. I'm going to locate the C-spanner into one of the holes on the back end and remove it by turning it anti-clockwise. That will loosen it. We then undo this and remove the spigot from the end of the tap. So the next step is to remove the handle from the tap, and we also want to remove the spigot shaft from the handle. So we undo that from there. If that is a bit tight, you may need to use something like the grips to get onto there, but it shouldn't be overly tight anyway. We just undo that knurled nut and remove the spigot. So the next step is to remove the spindle which locates the seat on the tap. Using a blunt sort of tool, the end of a winkle picker will do. Just push that shaft out and remove the shaft from the tap. The next step is to remove the seal or the seat from the spindle, and you can do that by using the winkle picker, hooking it in underneath and flicking it off. You could use a knife and cut that away. Careful not to damage the end, and or pointy nose pliers would also help. And the other thing we want to do is also remove this O-ring from here. Right, so now we're going to place the seat over the spindle and the O-ring over the shaft. So we get the seat, there's a curved end and a flat end. We're just going to pick the spindle up and place the curved end down over the seat, over the end of the tap. Right, and then we grab the end of it, peel it over the top, and voila, it sits in place. Now we'll get the O-ring, and slide the O-ring over the end of the shaft, down, and it will roll into the groove on the spindle. So this is food grade grease. Now we're going to use this just to lubricate that O-ring a little bit. It's specific to beer, so you can't just use any food grade grease. Okay, so a little dab on your finger, not much bigger than that, or about the same size, and just run that around that O-ring just to give us a little bit of lubrication there. So we're going to locate the tap shaft back into the tap with the keyway facing straight up. We insert that in there like that. If it doesn't line up directly, just bring a screwdriver and just move that around. And the idea of that keyway is so we can then locate the spindle shaft straight in to the tap. Like that. So while we're doing that, we'll replace all the seals. So the next thing to do is the nylon seat, which will sit down over the ball joint. We place that down and it sits down nicely. The next thing will be the O-ring. We sit the O-ring down on top, and then the knurled nut, which sits down on top of that and does up. And the firmer you make it, the stiffer the spindle is to move, so it doesn't need to be over tightened. It can be just nice and firm. That's it. We're going to remove this O-ring just simply by reaching in and flicking it out. You can see that seated area there. We just replace it now with a new O-ring, push it in place, and it sits against that rim. So the next thing is to replace the spigot. So we use the knurled nut, place it over the back of the spigot, pick the spigot up, position it onto the tap, and then just do the knurled nut up so it's firm, not overly firm at this point, just nice and firm. The next step is to put the handle back onto the shaft of the tap. So we screw the handle back on, and then just check the action to see that it's not too firm. So we check that action. If it is too firm, loosen off on the knurled nut. If it's too sloppy, just tighten that knurled nut a little bit. So on the snap lock spigot we have three indentations just like this. So the three indentations on the spigot line up with the 3 ball bearings that are on the snap lock. So to locate the tap into the position, we just pull the snap lock back, push it in, lining up the ball bearing. If the tap doesn't line exactly right, it doesn't matter. We can then just slightly straighten it up. Then using our C-spanner, hook the C-spanner into the groove and then tighten that up nice and firm, and voila, we've serviced the tap and it's all ready for action.